wonderful. I wish I had a beautiful voice instead of a terrible attitude, but... I suffer from depression. Anyone else? That's my idea of crowd work. My mom said she first knew I was a gloomy Gus when I refused to get out of bed for kindergarten, saying stuff like, "What's the point?" Or I do something once but find doing it again distressingly redundant. You know, stuff like going down a slide. The only thing I really enjoyed as a kid was TV shows and movies, so they gave me some unrealistic expectations, like when I took up figure skating, and it was nothing like ice castles. I did not win the nationals, I did not go blind, and no one even who looked remotely like Robbie Benson ever said to my father, "Not trying is pointless and cruel." Both my parents suffered from depression, and I still don't know, do we inherit it or imitate it? Is it nature, nurture, or just a great activity that families can share? Like playing Hungry, Hungry Hippos in hell. I think I was about 5 years old, but who knows, you ever look back and think, God, I was such a young idiot. I must have been 8 when it happened, and your family's like, actually, you were 30. Still, I think I was about 5, and it was Christmas morning, and we finished opening our gifts, and my dad suddenly got very sad, and I realized I hadn't given him anything, and so I thought that's what's making him sad. So I went to his room, and I grabbed his old slippers, and I wrapped them up in toilet paper, thinking somehow this is a gift, and this is a gift that's going to cheer him up. I found him sitting in his office in the dark with his head in his hands, and I said, "Hey, Dad, what you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just sitting here wondering why the hell I was ever born." And I looked at my gift, and even in my childish, naive adorableness, I thought, oh, fuck, this is not going to cut it. And I put it behind me, and I backed my little butt out of there. But soon enough, he emerged from his office, and I gave it to him, and he was like, "I love them. Oh, they fit perfectly. How did you know?" And he hugged me, and he was like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, and those slippers were like Lulu's pedals. Only my dad didn't hit rock bottom once in his life. He hit it about 10 times a week. Out of nowhere, he'd erupt with something like, "You want my advice, Susie? Don't ever get married and have kids." And then an hour later, he'd be telling me I'm his favorite of his 8 kids that he wanted to have. At least we saved a lot of money on actual roller coasters. But that's the brand of depression I have. It hits me hard and out of the blue, and it's ridiculously dark and illogical, and just as quickly it goes away, and I'm like, what the hell was that all about? Unfortunately, one time I fell into one that didn't let up. It was a year after my mom died, and my boyfriend and I broke up. He said he didn't feel like he made me happy, and I was unable to convince him, no, this is as happy as I get. Well, what flattened me was that the last thing my mom said to me, literally, on her deathbed was, "Marry him." No, I'm sorry, she didn't say that because she could no longer speak. She wrote it laboriously on paper. Marry him. And when I laughed, she underlined it. So, Catholic, kind of felt like I let her down, for all eternity. So these were the kind of thoughts swirling in my head, and it wasn't letting up for weeks, this depression. It was building until one night I thought, maybe I should kill myself. And after just some deliberation, I thought, this is a great idea. I'll do it. I'll do the old head in the gas oven routine, go out Sylvia Plath style. It's very blue and airy. I wrote a note to my dad apologizing, saying it was depression. I figured he'd understand that. Then I sat there with the oven door open and breathed into the gas, but like just as quickly, I thought, okay, well this is ridiculous. I could kill somebody. And I turned it off and I opened the windows and I sat there but still it freaked me out. So I called Suicide Hotline because I thought Suicide Hotline offered depressed people free, immediate, over-the-phone advice. And maybe some long-term counseling, maybe even group counseling, like with a Bob Newhart type counselor. And, I could be the funny Jack Riley patient. So I was a bit surprised shortly after by talking to my suicide preventer to find 2 police officers at my door. And though I tried to convince them that I was absolutely no longer feeling suicidal, they handcuffed me and took me to county hospital and booked me on a 72-hour psych lockdown. Well, I was pissed. I felt very Jessica Lange and Francis. And so that's how I behaved. I mean, if they had asked me my occupation, I'm absolutely sure I would have written down cocksucker. And in I went. Inside the psych ward was a nurse's station protected by a floor-to-ceiling metal gate, and that's how the nurses interacted with us, is through this nurse ratchet-like window gate. And they gave me a toothbrush and a pill, which I refused to take, just like Francis. The rest of the psych ward was one big open room with beds and tables. It was the middle of the night, so the other patients were sleeping, and I was shocked to discover that there were crazy men sleeping in beds right next to insane women. I was given the bed next to a young Mexican girl. She looked about 15. And across from me there was this weird guy sitting bolt upright in his bed staring at me. So I did not sleep that night. Later that morning another patient arrived, only this one wasn't handcuffed. He was fully strapped to a plank with about a dozen belts, and his face was in a Hannibal Lecter mask. They wheeled this monster into a special back room where I assume they tied him down and threw him raw meat. For the rest of the night, I waited for the Mexican girl to wake up, and when she did, I asked her if she would please go to the bathroom with me and watch the door while I peed. She looked much older when she wasn't sleeping, and as it turns out she was 29. She told me she had tried to overdose on pills because she felt guilty about having an abortion. I told her, hey, I'm Catholic too. It seemed immediately apparent to us that we were the sanest of the crazies, and out of sheer terror we just began to hold hands, and we didn't let go. We held hands waiting in line for breakfast, watching TV while she called her parents, while I checked my messages. Nobody called. We just held hands, and while one did anything, the other one scanned the room for any sudden movements. I thought of ordinary people, and I wondered if we'd be friends later in the real world and meet in coffee shops at various stages of denial. I think this is going to be the best year yet, Mexican girl. On the second day, her parents showed up for a visit, and she introduced me to them. And her parents seemed very concerned about her, but they acted as if I was the doctor and she was the patient. Racism. She wanted to know, she said, but they told her she was going to be transferred to a long-term facility, a thought that terrified me. I gave her a hug goodbye, and she gave me her phone number, and I watched the police escort her out. I sat alone now, listening to a nurse try to explain to a Japanese woman who spoke no English that a stranger hadn't tried to cut her throat. She had done that to herself. I was feeling saner by the minute. I talked to a 16-year-old boy. He was a prostitute, and he said he just acted crazy for the cops, just to get a place to sleep. I tried to help him think of a family member or a friend who would take him in. I tried to convince him that being a prostitute might not be the best choice for his life. I wasn't very successful. For some reason, he wasn't taking advice from the lady in the psych ward. I sat alone again, and I looked out the window, and there was this thin tree in a small circle of dirt surrounded by concrete, and I thought about the trees behind my great apartment, and I thought about playing single girl in the basement just like Laverne and Shirley. And I thought, wait, I never wanted to get married. And suddenly I felt fine, and thankfully I was out of there the next day. A few months later, I called my Mexican friend from the psych ward. I thought enough time had passed and that maybe we could laugh about it. She said she had no idea who I was or what I was talking about. She said she'd never been in the psych ward, and she hung up on me. And I thought, well, at least I finally had an experience that was just as exciting as the movies. The horror movies. Okay, gotta go now. I think I'm due for another immobilizing fit of despondency. Good night, everyone.